And I'm Ashley McCracken.
We have the privilege of introducing our next speaker, Raymond Chen. Raymond is a current sophomore at Jenks High School, and he is involved in school activities such as mock trial, academic team, and speech and debate. After high school, Raymond plans to study international relations in hopes of stepping into foreign policy.
In today's talk, Raymond examines the consequences of equating forgetting with forgiveness, and how this mindset can erase accountability, reshape narratives, and ultimately distort society's understanding of the past. Please welcome Raymond.
Good afternoon, Jenks High School. With your hands, how many of you have a pet peeve? I do! Well, I have a confession to make. One of my biggest pet peeves in life is when people use the phrase forgive and forget. Because apparently using it is meant to avoid you from any crime known to mankind. Like, what do you mean you want to forget about it when you ate my whole bag of wing sauce when I clearly labeled it? And what do you mean you don't want to forget about it when you vanished like a ghost when I got my first speeding ticket on school grounds? Needless to say, I did eventually forgive those who wronged me, but to anyone who still uses the phrase as a legal defense for being a fake day one, shame on you. Now, beyond the personal stories I have with this phrase, there appears to be a much darker side that we haven't explored. You see, society intrinsically go in a cycle of harm and forgiveness, because we all have every wrongdoing, broken promise, and so on through. None of us will have a stable relationship by next Friday. And there's something beautiful about the cycle playing out. At an interpersonal scale, however, this becomes increasingly concerning as we are conditioned to ask for grace without accountability, to forget about the past without learning our lesson. And when entire governments start doing this exact tactic, we must ask ourselves one question, which is, where does the line between forgiveness and forgetting start to blur? Today, we'll answer this question by looking at the fine prints with the price of forgetting with a pair of new eyes. First, by remembering what both forgiveness and forgetting truly means, and how we have psychologically confused the two terms. Second, we'll examine some ways that governments and institutions have exploited this confusion to rewrite narratives and shift past. And finally, we'll open up the book, not to study for another 8-year-old DBQ, but to understand why German philosopher George Hegel once said that we often learn from history that we do not learn from history. Now, considering the phrase forget and forget, mashing these two words together, you'd think they'd actually be pretty similar, right? Well, that actually could be further from the truth. You see, according to the American Psychological Association, forgiveness is defined as an act of intentionally putting away feelings of resentment without forgetting what happened. Or in other words, to forgive someone is an act of intention and courage. The truth is to hold on to the pain whilst not letting it control you. Forgetting, on the other hand, is just easy to remember something I've been master every time a unit test rolls around. Sorry, Mr. Bride. Though I do have an excuse in the form of science, as our brains are actually wired to do this. Experts call this motivated forgetting, a defense mechanism when an individual pushes away past experiences to protect ourselves from stress. In a study published by psychologists Michael Anderson and Colin Green, we see this exact phenomenon. Participants were all given pairs of words with a negative connotation and later asked to block them out. Unsurprisingly, over time, the more they tried to block out the word, the weaker that memory became. Upon closer inspection, the brain literally reduces its ability to retrieve that information. Now, that seems like a good thing, right? Like if I want to forget about the day I bombed my 3,000 final and my own GPA, and the book my mom gave me after I came home, that'd be a good thing, right? Well, the problem arises when entire governments start implementing the exact tactic regarding history. This pattern has echoed across the globe, but nowhere else should we look closer than the very country we reside in. According to a study published by the Pew Research Center back in 2023, 1 in 4 Americans thought that increased attention to slavery was harmful for society. Not false history, or even hateful history, but history given enough attention for the truth to shine through. The prevalence of this phenomenon is no surprise when you realize that the problem is at the root of our education system. For Black Americans, it's that centuries of brutality were condensed into a few softened paragraphs. For Indigenous peoples, it's the way that entire languages, cultures, and populations were systematically erased, yet their stories appear in our curriculum as simply footnotes. There's perhaps no better example of this than the quiet banning of books within our very classrooms. Back in 2023, Florida's Monte County School District banned Nikki Giovanni's Rosa, an illustrated children's book detailing the heroics of Rosa Parks during the civil rights movement. And Giovanni wasn't just any author. She was a award-winning critic, poet, and one of the most prominent voices in the Black Arts movement. Yet somehow, a book meant to teach children about the power of courage and the face of discrimination was labeled as dangerous. This wasn't just an isolated instance, as in similar school districts, similar works faced the same treatment. They were labeled as controversial, political, and too advised for children to consume. And ironically, a story about a woman refusing to get off her seat in the face of racism was apparently too dangerous for children to sit with. Though, to my overly patriotic Americans in the room, this isn't an inherently American issue, as it's an action that has been echoed across the world. It starts with a missing book from a shelf, then the paragraph is removed for being too political, and finally, an entire massacre can be reduced down to an instant. You look towards Turkey, which our many genocide to this day is considered a hoax, where the mass deportation and killing of Armenian Christians during World War I was considered unavoidable tragedy, relocation, and chaos. Just a label, just a word. Yet so enough for history to be rewritten, for violence to be considered complexity, for killing to be considered context, and for atrocity to shift into both sides suffered. This example is one of its clearest extremes when looking at Japan's treatment of the Nanjing Massacre. Nearly 90 years ago, Imperial Japan invaded the Chinese city of Nanjing. And the killing, sexual violence, and brutality that followed shows one of the darkest chapters in human history. Yet, to this day, in certain political and educational contexts, including Wikipedia, the event is labeled as the Nanjing incident, as if the taking of lives from hundreds of thousands was ever a misunderstanding. Incident, as if the stripping of dignity from men, women, and children alike was at all comparable to a Hallway incident report. It is at this point where we reach the most extreme of forgetting, where the crime itself doesn't disappear, yet the words surrounding it become so small that history is entirely rewritten. Okay, I know that was a lot of information to cover on a school afternoon, And I can't, in clear conscience, like all the amazing speakers here today, offer you 3 clear solutions, because that wouldn't be realistic. And I definitely can't just give you one single path to solving the problem, because Mr. Engel will probably pop out of nowhere and ask the question, Raymond, to what extent? Though, just maybe, as much pain as this our class caused me, maybe the correct way to solve this problem isn't to come up with supposedly perfect solutions, but to ask ourselves the harder questions. Questions like, to what extent are we willing to trade truth for comfort? To what extent are we willing to label avoidance as forgiveness? And to what extent are we going to let nations keep getting away by moving on when accountability has been taken? If there was one message I hope you won't forget when you walk out of this auditorium today, I'm glad I got to skip class by the way, it'd be that forgiveness was never a tool built for erasure, but rather a symbol of our courage to deal with our often uncomfortable past. Because even though I can forgive the ones who ate my Wingstop, dished me on a speeding ticket, history is the one leftover we cannot afford to throw away. So the next time the world shouts at you to forgive and forget, I ask you to forgive and remember, just